This is the Free Zone Communique on the P4B. I'm your host, Matt Jordan. And now we are going into summer. It's going to be another long summer, folks. I think we're going to have posers trying to redo the Floyd riots who were trying to do the, the civil rights riots or trying to do the 60s. Um, yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer. But here at the P4B, we are looking good. This is a great day. We have a great guest coming up, a game changer. A game changer. The P4B is now operating closer to the top of the heap. We have the number two man at Brexit. At one time, he was the acting leader of the Brexit party, the UKIP party. Moved back to the Conservative Party recently. And has an amazing personal story. So we will get to that straight away.
This is the Free Zone Communiqué, transmitting from Virginia's unoccupied sector. If you think smart cities, DEI, censorship, government intrusion, bug paste, and other left-wing nonsense are no longer a possibility, think again. We've won one election with slim majorities. Our work to rebuild a free and sane America has just begun.
Joining me now, this is a real pinch me moment for your host. This is a guest I've been looking forward to for a long time, total game changer for the Free Zone and the P4B. Please welcome to the show, Lord Greg Mackinlay of Richboro. Welcome to the show. Oh,
very good to be on, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Mel didn't explain certain things to me. Like when I address you, how many times do I touch my forehead to the floor?
I think prior to 1776, you might have done, being an American, but I think that's long gone.
So I don't have to address you as your worshipness and
no, nothing like that. No, either. Craig will do very well. Thanks, Matt.
Craig, oh, outstanding. If you would, you weren't always a politician in your career.
No, I was a child once. No, it was my political light went on in about 1991. And it was because of Britain's membership of the European Union. It wasn't the European Union in those days. It was just a fairly, what we thought was fairly benign free trade area called the European Economic Community.
Right.
And then there was, as these supranational organizations always do, they try and grab more and more power whenever they're offered it. And the constituent members of the then European Economic Community, they agreed to go forward into something called the European Union, which just by its very nature has overtones of union. It does what it says on the tin. And it was then that myself, I was merely a chartered accountant, I suppose you call it a CPA in the US, doing normal stuff as CPAs do. You might say not very exciting stuff, but that was the living I was in. And we were in a bizarre situation where our currency, the pound sterling, was getting linked to the then German Deutschmark. And that wasn't the right place for Britain to be. We were sort of in a quasi-currency union, and it was a precursor of the euro. And it was the first time that people could see this isn't just about free trade. This is a new country trying to be formed under the guise of the European Union. And I don't know why. I suppose it was because of my work that my clients were going bankrupt because we were under high interest rates. Whereas if you're in a recession, you tend to get low interest rates to try and stimulate the economy. Right. Because we were linked with a foreign currency. those normalities weren't holding true. And I don't know, for whatever reason, a light went on in my head, and I said to myself, something's got to be done. Now, I was a Conservative Party member at the time, but this was all happening under a Conservative Prime Minister, the name of John Major. Long gone as a prime minister. But this to me did not seem like conservative activity. So me and others, we came together and formed a new political party, which is always going to be a difficult endeavour. It's usually, they say, one man and his dog. Well, I didn't even have a dog. So it really was thin on the ground. But it was one of those things that really grabbed me, because what I thought I was doing was absolutely right. And so it turned out to be. So 25 years later,
It's hard to
Britain did
believe.
have that referendum to leave the European Union, and lo and behold, we just won that referendum. And I thought really that perhaps my political work was done. I'd spent time forming that new political party called the UK Independence Party at the time. Nigel Farage, who is known to some, maybe in the US, he came along some time afterwards, and we were, good pals in those early days. I don't know. After a while, I just thought the party was not going in the direction it was meant to be: fresh and new and good and clean and all the rest of it. But I suppose got tainted like political parties often do. And I left it in 2005 and came back to the Conservative Party. I got elected as a local councillor on the local authority where I lived. Quite a big local council. I suppose it had a budget of about $1.5 billion. It was a pretty big council.
Right.
And I did that for 8 years, and then got selected to fight for the UK Parliament as an MP. And lo and behold, I don't know why Nigel Farage decided to stand in the same seat for UKIP, and I beat him.
I was just
So it
reading
was
that.
all rather bizarre.
That was Tenet. Is that where that took place?
That was what? In Thanet, yes, South Thanet, which is very, very east of Kent.
Nigel is known as a bit of a character in this country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we were exposed to him as a caricature in movies and the way people editorialize about him. But he's quite articulate. He can lay down an argument.
Oh, we can. I mean, he and I, we both agree the same things on many, many things. So it was always bizarre to me why he decided to stand out of 650 constituents he could have stood in. Why he'd stand against someone who was a founder of UKIP is always a bit bizarre. But you better ask Nigel the reason why he decided to do that.
Please hang up and try again.
At the bottom of the page, I'll leave links where you can find all our stuff. Wherever you get to P4B in the Free Zone, please follow, subscribe, leave reviews and comments. And share. This is how we grow. I'll leave a link to where you can support the P4B directly, so you too can be a political party pooper. But the most pleasure you can get by supporting us is to shop Po River. I'll leave samples and links for that as well. Thanks to all our supporters and subscribers.
Anyway, he wasn't successful. I beat him in 15, and then I was an MP for 9 years, and I got struck down by sepsis. Day before, doing normal stuff in the office, doing MP stuff, I suppose, like you'd expect a congressman, a senator to do. That's the sort of the equivalent of. And feeling a little bit unwell that evening, and took myself to bed early, was very sick during the night, just feeling sick, and was sick. And by the morning, my wife very concerned about how pale I was looking and just not looking well.
What were the
And
symptoms you were experiencing? What was
I
most
was,
at that point?
I suppose, well, the trouble was my blood pressure was fine. My blood oxygen was fine. My wife's a pharmacist, and she called her brother, who's a doctor, and he came round, and all my normal, indication signs were good. But I was just feeling absolutely dreadfully lousy. Inexplicably, there was no reason why you should be feeling this ill. And that is, I think, the giveaway for sepsis. It comes in many forms. It is your own immune system going into hyperdrive and causing an overreaction to a normal infection. The normal infection they put mine down to was pneumonia, which apparently, if I was to swab your nose right now, Matt, you would find pneumonia in it. It is
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it caused this outrageous response. So I was taken to hospital, and within a very short time, I ended up going the same blue as your top. I went into a full septic shock. They put me into a coma for 16 days. My kidneys had packed up for a while. My liver was in a bad state. I was in a very, very poor state. And my wife was being told, well, this chap has got 5%
Make them
chance of
comfortable.
surviving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps this is it. So anyway, the good thing is my heart held up, which is often the thing that packs up. And I got through, woke up at a different hospital. I've been moved to a London hospital where they got a bit more experience of these type of things. And I woke up to my limbs completely black. My lower legs and lower arms, hands completely black, and I could only liken them to Pharaoh's hands that
Is
you
that
just dug
gangrene
up.
you were suffering? And you
Complete gangrene, yeah, yeah. So they were like Pharaoh's hands that you dig out of the desert. They were dry, black, and just in a, not moving. They were dead by then. And so there I was waiting for the amputations. The surgeons decided, right, we're going to see what develops, see what is alive, what is dead, see what we can save. And so there I was in hospital in London for 6 weeks, awaiting the fateful day of amputation, which came on the 1st of December in 2023. And so I, wake up from there with no lower legs and no lower arms. And now I've got, these great prosthetics, which are some of the best in the world. And I was lucky to keep them my elbows and knees. So you've got the use of your lower legs with prosthetics, and it
I
makes them.
saw you interviewed. I think it was Sky News. I'm not sure. And you were talking about the prosthetics.
Yeah,
You had one of your bionics, but then you also had basically a hook.
that's what I'm afraid the health department of the UK had given me was two of those. And I laughingly said regularly on the media, I said, well, I'm not quite sure what I'm meant to do with these. All I can see they're good for is breaking windows and fighting in a pub. I can't see what else you're going to do with them. But I'm on a private pathway now, and I've got some of the best prosthetics in the world. I mean, the health department in the UK will give them to you, but you'll have to wait a number of years. I'm not entirely sure what use you're meant to be in society while you wait for the day that they give you the ones they will give you in the end.
Yeah.
I'm now fighting a battle in the country to say, well, you're going to give them in the end. For heaven's sake, give them earlier rather than later, and let people get on with their lives.
Yeah. Well, I interrupted you on that stream of consciousness. So you you're now a quad amputee. You've got your
Yep.
prosthetic.
So
You're
I'm
working
sort
on
of 1st December. I had months of rehabilitation ahead of me.
Yeah.
Total was I was in hospital for about 7 months. So went to a clinic it's called the Amputee Rehabilitation Unit. Guess what it does? It rehabilitates amputees. And I was there for some months, and they start getting you up on your feet, on prosthetic legs, and just trying to get you used to the new life ahead of you. And I've been out of hospital now for about 14 months. And you get better and better every day. You walk it that little bit further, and I'm in these better prosthetics. So the election came round somewhat prematurely. I got back into Parliament on the 22nd of May of 2024. That was my first return day. And I understand it was even aired across the US because I've got cousins in California. And he phoned me quite excited that I'd made the television in California of my return to Parliament. And that was aired in Australia and Germany and Spain and I think quite widely around the world. So I thought that was going to be my slow return to Parliament. We're all expecting a general election in the UK because we don't have fixed terms and we know when the date is, unlike the US, where there is certain flexibility about when elections are. And the clever money was saying it's probably going to be October 24, if not even November or December 24. But that very day, the day of my return to Parliament, the election was called. I'd only been out of hospital for just over a month, and I had to really take the decision that I'm just not ready for this.
Yeah.
I'm really literally just back on my feet, as it were. and I'm not ready to fight what was always going to be a tough election. So I took the decision not to stand. And then, lo and behold, I have to tell you, there had been some discussions if such things had come to pass. On election day in early July, I had a phone call from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and he said, "Yeah, you will be on the peers, the honours list this afternoon, and you will be going in the House of Lords." So it gives me the opportunity to continue politics in a slightly different way, without a constituency, no, without constituents. So it's a slightly different part of the system than you do in the US. You have two houses in the US, but they're both elected. We have the elected house, the House of Commons, which I was in for 9 years. Then we have the unelected house, the House of Lords, which I am now going to be in without elections and for the rest of my days. So it's there for life.
Nice.
And the
Good work if
procedure
you
is
can get
somewhat
it.
well, and the procedure is somewhat old-fashioned and archaic and rather lovely. And the cousin in California who phoned me up, excited that he'd seen me returning to Parliament, he came over specially to see my introduction to the House of Lords on the 17th of October of last year.
Well,
So it was a very nice,
from whence
exciting day.
cometh the authority? Who decides that you're going to receive? You received a peerage, right?
A peerage, yes. It's very much in the hands of the sitting Prime Minister. So there are political honours. The leader of the opposition, whoever that might be from time to time, they have a limited list of who they can put in as well. And then there are certain others that are just tend to go in there. Like if you'd been the head of the armed forces in the UK, you've been the head of the judiciary of the court system, and you come up to retirement day, you will usually be put in the House of Lords. So it's a place where it brings together experience, people who've had experience across government, across life, not necessarily just government. It could be people who've been in business or have been academics. So the idea of the Lords is to bring together people who've got experience of life, and they can make legislation that comes out of the elected house, the Commons end, that much better, more reasonable, more sensible. That is the whole idea behind it. And it all sounds rather archaic that you're not elected, but you are a legislator. But it's one of those peculiar things. It sort of works, so let's not upset it.
Right, right. The king has to sign off on all that, right?
He does indeed, yes. And you get a rather nice scroll, and I've got the opportunity to have a coat of arms, and that is in progress at the moment. We're in sort of draft 2 of my coat of arms. So you can put in there features that have been part of your life.
Yeah, I put.
And the reason I called myself Mackinlay of Richborough was because Richborough was a very small settlement. Hardly anyone lives there. That is between the north end and the south end of my old political constituency of South Thanet. And it's very historic. It is where the Romans first came ashore in the UK in AD 56. I think it was AD 56, might be 43. I'll have to look up the history myself. A long time ago, that of which we can be sure. And it ended up being the biggest Roman settlement in Roman Britain in its earliest days. So it had big history. And also it is a sort of a confluence of all things energy. Strangely, it used to have a coal-powered power station fired up by Kent coal, mined in Kent. And you've now got you've got big solar fields nearby. You've got a biogas producer nearby. And it's also where interconnectors come in from Belgium and the continent. So it's sort of the confluence, a lot of energy stuff, which is now my great interest. So for many reasons, Richborough seemed a very good name to adopt, because it was part of the constituency, the reason which I am now in the House of Lords, and also because of the interesting history, both old and new, which comes with it.
Yeah, we will discuss both of those things. But just for the record, you got your massive tract of land and your mansion and your servants and stables all came with the title?
No, sadly not. Maybe in days of old, but part of the coat of arms, you can have a pin badge made which is another representation of your coat of arms, for one's staff. So I won't be needing too many of those. But I will be looking out some local farmers to see if I can buy a little tract of land in the area of Richborough so I can actually sort of put my flag on it
There you
in due course.
I kind of figured if I ever went to see it, it would be like grog in the servants' hall for the commoner.
Well, there is the fort. The Richborough Roman fort still exists. It's obviously in bits now, but it's run by English Heritage, one of these national charities, and they have got a little shop there. So one of the ideas I have is to get a fridge magnets made with my coat of arms on it, and they can sell it, and the profits will go to the UK Sepsis Trust. So that is another little ambition. So there'll be something of the Lord Mackinlay of Richborough available in the old Richborough fort in due course.
Right. Okay. Now, at this point, and this is amazing development. You're coming off a wicked situation. You've given up, or so you thought, politics. You had to step back. Bam, they drop a peerage on you, which is nice. But now your life goes in two different directions. You develop two priorities now. One is the sepsis
Yeah.
and making people aware. That's why I was asking you earlier, what were your symptoms?
Yeah.
And the problem is they are too varied, aren't they?
They are varied, yes, but I think the key is listen to the patient. And if you're telling your, well, if you get into a hospital location, they're pretty good at spotting it. And across a variety of tests, if you've got a good physician, this is one thing that I think AI will help in the future, where your blood tests and your condition will go into the AI diagnostic machine, and it will have a greater potential of actually finding your diagnosis than probably a good physician even will. So once you're in a hospital location, you've got a reasonably good chance of having sepsis spotted. But it's often too late by then. What you really want is families to be able to spot it a little bit earlier. Because if it's spotted early enough, I was very unlucky. It came on within 12, 14 hours, start to finish. But usually you have a few days grace where you're just gradually feeling worse and worse and worse. If somewhere across that 3, 4 days of feeling worse and worse, your family member can say, I'm going to ask this question, could this be sepsis? Then you can have very simple antibiotics costing, buttons effectively, and lots of fluids pumped into you, again, costing buttons. You will come out the other side, hopefully with no lasting damage. But as it's longer and further down the track, the more damage will be done, and you'll start losing things like I did. It's not just hands and feet that are gone. I had damage to the inside of my gum and palate. I lost a bit of ear. I got a bit of nose damage, lip damage. This, seriously upset your day. I can tell you that. So yeah, that's one of my campaigns, to just try and encourage people to be sepsis aware. The other one, part of the similar campaign, is fighting against the government, frankly, to say people are going to live from sepsis because you've got new treatments, even at a later stage. People like me who would have died years ago are now living. But the problem with living is you're going to come out damaged. So you're going to get a lot more people with no limbs. So you better gear yourself up to actually making sure that they get the limbs they need to get on with life. And I have to say, what is given out, and I know I've spoken to lots of people in the US as well, because of the insurance system and the price of these type of prosthetics, what are not cheap, you do end up with people being given what I call pre-Victorian prosthetics. They are body-worn hooks and rubber hooks, the like of which you saw.
Right.
Whereas my argument is, if you go into A&E, into accident and emergency units, with a bad injury on your arm, they don't reach for a 1920s hot bread poultice. They give you an up-to-date antibiotic and whatever else you need. So why are we still resorting to pre-Victorian, pre-1800 prosthetics for people? It's not good enough, and I'm fighting for them, trying to give them a voice
That's what
so
people
that
like
it
about
can be better.
Yeah, that's what people like about Craig Mackinlay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I hope so. Well, I've been given a voice. Being in the House of Lords gives you a voice,
yeah,
and I intend to use it for that. And as you quite rightly say, that's one side. But I'm still pursuing all of those political issues that were important to me as an MP, and that is to fought for Brexit for a quarter of a century, make sure that Britain left the European Union. I mean, therein is a story. Did we do it right? Are we being dragged back into it slowly by this current Labour government? Yes, I think we probably are. Anyway, there's battles ahead on that front still. But the other battle that I've had my eye on since about 2008, when the UK passed the Climate Change Act of 2008,
right.
that is when we really started in earnest down this pathway towards net zero, decarbonisation, deindustrialisation, and all the problems that come with it. So I've been concerned about this for a while. But now it is very much in my focus. I am the director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. The previous Lord who set this up was Lord Lawson, Lord Nigel Lawson, who was one of the previous chancellors of the Exchequer of the UK. So I'm following in good footsteps, because to me this is the big issue for the West. I'm very pleased to say that your America is actually ripping up a lot of this nonsense and actually realizing that fossil fuels work. They give you cheap energy, and without cheap energy, you will not have a vibrant economy. We are nowhere near that in the UK. We are going the fastest and furthest and most expensive way of getting towards net zero, and we're seeing the deindustrialization of the UK on a daily basis.
I
I
have
mean, we are paying for our domestic electricity at home, our consumer electricity, about 4 times what you're paying in the US,
right,
because we're relying on windmills and batteries and nonsense that doesn't work.
right.
Whereas we should be relying on nuclear and gas. But I'm sure we will get there, and this will be a new battle that Mackinlay is fighting. It might take a few years to get there, but it's one I intend to win.
I have to say, I've been watching, especially when it comes to energy in Europe, you guys and Germany, and it's like watching somebody hit himself in the head with a baseball bat again and again and again.
Oh,
And
completely. And every week there is a new lunacy comes out of the net zero system. I mean, the latest one we're trying to do, I mean, you just couldn't make this up really, is to capture carbon. So it's called carbon capture and storage.
yeah,
So the ambition on British taxpayers' money, £22 billion. So that's in US terms about
pretty
$30 billion. So
big dollar, yeah.
not an inconsequential amount of money. Money you could be spending on something useful. But no, the ambition is to try and create a system of carbon capture and storage, a technology that doesn't exist at scale at the moment. And the amount of carbon that they intend to capture every year is 8 million, as if it works, is 8 million tons. Now, to put that into context, 8 million tons of CO2 is 1/50th of what the UK produces in a year. And that's little UK with only 1% of global output of CO2. So we're going to spend $30 billion to try and capture 1/50th of just the UK output, which is just a mere 100th of global output. So you
Right.
tell me about mad endeavors. And by the way, China, Indonesia, India, all the other developing countries are producing one new coal-powered power station about every 2 or 3 days. And this 8 million tons that we're trying to capture is the output of one coal power station. So we're going to spend $30 billion to capture the incremental output of about 3 days around the world. And they're telling me that that is a sensible use of taxpayers' money. I mean, this is how just off the scale the debate has got to in the UK.
Have you spent any time with Bjorn Lomborg? The
I know of him, yes, and I'm due to be meeting him sometime this year.
outstanding. That would be a
I mean, he
great
writes some
grant.
great stuff.
You and
He
him.
writes some very, very sensible stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's plenty of writers out there writing very sensible stuff. I mean, I'm more concentrating on the practicalities and the money, and why are we just simply outsourcing high energy production to China, and then bring it back onto a diesel ship back to the UK. I mean, that if carbon dioxide is your big concern in life, that is not saving any
It's not
carbon dioxide
efficient.
at all. That's
A
actually
car-
increasing it.
The components that would someday become a car, an electric car,
Yeah.
that's 90 countries involved. In
Well,
those components.
exactly. If you were to do the sort of the sea miles of actually producing an electric car,
Right.
and the diesel diggers, etc., required to mine Africa and find the rare earth metals and then smelt the copper and all of the rest of it. And it's true. I'm sorry to say, with things like solar panels, when you try and put them into a northern climate like the UK or Ireland, they don't work very well.
I was about to
there are
say,
reports
that's like
there are reports out there saying you'll never actually get the carbon back that is expended in actually making the things.
Right,
So
right.
we're on these sort of mad endeavors all over the place.
I said a couple days ago to putting a solar farm in England is like putting a water collection unit in the Death Valley.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes, it's not going
you'll
to do a
get
lot.
water sometimes, but you know, it's not. You know, there's often a cloudy environment. England is very much like our Pacific Northwest
Yep.
in terms of precipitation, cloud cover. The temperatures are pretty stable.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the cost of all these endeavors is just completely off the wall. There was a study I read about California, that if you just wanted to decarbonize the electricity supply in California, never mind replacing the gas-powered cars and the gas in your home for heating and gas and coal and whatever else. This is just the electricity supply. It would, and you wanted to replace that with renewables that then charge up batteries. The battery cost alone would be $16 trillion, which is about 4 times the gross output of California. And then these batteries would only last about 12 years. And then you have to do it all over again.
do it all over again, right?
Yeah. And all the while, you're probably spending a lot of money with China and the Chinese production chain, who have got, particularly Africa, pretty sewn up. So why would you want, if you're concerned about buying, as we have been, buying Putin's gas to support Putin's regime, why would you want to be spending even more money with President Xi's China, who I don't think is probably the most soft partner, I'll say it no more stiffly than that, partner in life than Putin would be. I mean, it's just lunacy, especially because the UK has got ample gas kicking around that would do us for some time yet, while we change our power supply towards nuclear, which to me seems to be the much better pathway.
Yeah, nuclear makes more sense. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of links of earlier discussions that I've had on the green, I call them green scams, the different renewable energy schemes. I don't know what it's like in England or in the UK. I assume it's similar. The green industry has become a crony vortex where money is collected, crazy schemes are announced. They may happen someday, they may not. That's not the point. The idea is to collect a massive amount of money and hand it to people like that knob Al Gore and his nonprofit and George Soros's nonprofits, and that's why these schemes exist.
Yeah, well, I've never really. I tell you why I've never really. I know exactly what you're saying, and there are huge monies being earned by certain players in this field. There's no doubt at all. Contracts that simply don't work, but they're propped up by the taxpayer, of course. I never do conspiracy. I'll tell you why, because I've been close to government for over 10 years now, And just watching how government works is like a slow train crash. If you think there is any real purpose and some clever controlling mind behind any of this, I have to disabuse you. It's not out there, and I don't suppose it is in the US either. It's
That,
just it's just a multitude of slow train crashes that come together, and we call it government.
oh,
But there are some very mad contracts out there. I mean, we're now signing up 20-year contracts in the UK. And I think that's being done by this current government because it knows it won't last too long. I don't expect there'll be a second Labour government. But contracts last way beyond a parliamentary term because
yeah.
contracts in Western countries are respected. So, even if we were to have a sensible change of government and we got ourselves off of this current net zero pathway that doesn't work onto one that maybe does, we'd be saddled with these unbelievably expensive contracts that would last up to 20 years. I
Decades.
mean, that is a fraud in itself.
Yeah, that leads to one of the questions I was going to ask later. You're now part of the Common Sense Committee?
Oh, I've been on lots of ones. I'm on the Common Sense Group is a sort of a parliamentary group, yeah, across both the Lords and the Commons. And I set up the Net Zero Scrutiny Group in
Yeah.
my last few years in the Commons, which again, I think does what it says on the tin. Net Zero Scrutiny Group. It's there to scrutinise these rather more outlandish ideas and propose something better. It's all very easy just to be critical of everything. I don't particularly have a rant against the whole global warming thing, as it were. I'm more concerned about the costs and the practicalities, what it'll do to our economies, what it'll do to
All
the
right.
poorer in our societies. And I ask the question, is there a better way? But in Britain's case, I mean, that example I sort of gave you, we're trying to do a carbon capture of 1/50th of our output, which is, by the way, is only 1/100th of the global. You might actually ask a very, very reasonable question because we know China, India, Indonesia hasn't even started digging stuff up yet, and nor has Africa. What is the point? What is the point? If global warming is coming, then you're better off spending the pounds and dollars getting ready for that, because I can tell you who's not going to stop burning fossil fuels. That's China and India, and Indonesia's barely started, and Africa's not even on first base. So no matter what we do, it is like a pinprick on a hog. It's not going to make the
Africa,
blindest bit of difference.
Africa and many other areas of the world have to
Yeah.
go
And who
from
can blame them?
where
Who
we
can blame
went
them?
all the way to
Energy
where
is
we
cheap.
are now just to be fully developed. And
Yeah,
they're going to have to burn a
absolutely.
lot of fossil fuels to do it. There's no way around it.
And they're not going to want to, import Chinese solar panels to do it. They're going to want to dig up their own domestic coal because it's the cheapest and it's available, and they'll do it no matter what happens at COP conferences. They're not going to stop, and who can blame them?
Yeah, and
But we're doing some very silly things.
all this has happened at the worst possible time, economically and demographically. We're
Well,
playing
absolutely.
the
We
game.
need all the money we can get to solve some demographic problems. Aging populations. We've got a massive aging population problem in the UK. You've got one in the US. Most Western countries do. That is going to be very expensive. We've now got the pressure to increase our defence in the face of a more uncertain world. I mean, that money has got to be found. So to then be spending, not only a lot of money on energy projects that don't work, but to actually be importing the gas that we do need. I mean, as I said, we've got lots of gas in the UK. We've decided to virtually turn the taps off. And we're now spending £30 billion, so 40 billion US dollars, on Norwegian gas, which comes out of the same basin that our gas
Guys
used to.
could, you guys could be drilling that, right?
We could be drilling
They
that.
could do it.
We're spending about $13 billion a year with the US. With your shale gas that you're now exploiting massively, and I don't blame you for that. We're spending similar amounts, about $13 billion a year, in Qatari gas. So all we're doing is enriching Qatar. And you think, well, I'm not quite so concerned about helping our friends and neighbours and our brothers and sisters in America. But I'd rather that money was being spent in the UK, coming out of our own
Of course,
oil
that's
grounds
your
and taps.
job.
I mean,
Yeah.
because you can tax that. That's jobs, that's tax, that's investment, and that is your seed corn money as you need to do other things in, with the demographic problems and defense problems and all the other issues of concern in a Western economy.
Yeah. We did touch just for a second on nuclear power.
Yeah.
Among those links I'll try to leave below the video line will be a discussion on liquid fluorine reactors powered by thorium. I call them lifters, and they're amazing little machines.
Yeah.
China's got it up and running. We were running one for 7 years, I think, 50s and 60s in Northridge with the technology we had then. Fast forward now, what could you do with these things?
Well,
I think they're going to be
absolutely. I mean,
our prayers.
our nuclear history has been, again, one of complete dither and disaster. We were the first nation to actually produce a functioning nuclear reactor in a place called Windscale up in Cumbria in the UK, first place in the world. And we had a great history of early adoption of nuclear power. And the French came along, and with France has done very well. They're about 60-70% of their electricity supply comes from nuclear, and they've kept theirs a bit more up to date than ours. But the last ones we made, I think, were in the sort of the early 1990s, and they're now coming towards end of life. And we are currently building one at some colossal cost, and we've got plans for a similar one to be built at a similar huge cost. I mean, we're talking something like $40 billion to build one power station. And these alone are not huge. They're only about 3 or 4 gigawatts. So not even less than 10% of what we need, more like between them, about 6-7% of what we need.
But you're gonna break the bank to build it.
Well, we're going to break the bank doing them. And I've been saying for years, because we've been powering nuclear submarines with Rolls-Royce reactors for, since the 1960s. We have got the technology of what you call a small modular reactor. These aren't new. They've been running around on submarines for years. Obviously, they'd have to be a little bit different for civilian use, but fundamentally, these are small power units. Oh. It is not technology that is, out there and not known. It actually exists. So what we are doing, again, stupidly, we are building 2 Bentley cars, hand-built, these 2 big reactors we're building, where what we need are Model T Fords in the form of lots of small modular reactors. And you could be putting these small modular reactors in replacement of the coal power stations that we used to have and the gas power stations that we either used to have or are still having a closing down, because you've got the stranded assets of all the copper cabling and all the cabling for the national grid all lead to where you used to have high power generation power stations. So all you need to do is plonk some of these small modular reactors in exactly the same place, wire them up. I know it makes it sound easy, but the stranded assets of all the wire that you need are there, ready to go. But oh no, we're going to completely cover the UK in new pylons as we try and put new windmills up and some solar panels that you quite rightly say don't work very well in the UK.
No, and they're wildly inefficient in the best of situations.
Yeah, well, it's not that you X equals Y. Like you've got you need 10 gigawatts. You put 10 gigawatts of windmills up. That's going to, hey presto, work. Well, of course not, because the wind doesn't blow sometimes. So suddenly you need to put up 30 or 40 gigawatts of stuff up on the hope that it might just about be enough. And then you'll need a lot of batteries as well for the days that the wind doesn't blow at all. The one thing we do know about solar panels is that there is a very good part of the day that I can tell you exactly the hours of day from now till eternity when they don't work at all. It's called the nighttime. So, these are not very reliable units to be using. You will need a lot of batteries to back them up. Correct. Or you can go down the route of creating hydrogen, or there are other means of storing the energy. None of them are cheap and none of them are very effective.
If you've seen pictures of those giant wind farms,
Yeah,
Have bank after bank after bank of these giant pinwheels.
yeah,
Whichever way the wind's coming from, that first bank gets full benefit. So if you got a good stiff breeze, they're cranking.
yeah.
Ones behind it are not.
I mean, once they're shadowed, they don't work so well.
Much
Yeah.
less efficiently. Because
Well, I mean, the other rather mad thing about these windmills, I mean, I call them windmills, not sort of wind turbines or wind farms. I mean, they're version 2 windmills that went out of fashion in about 1750. But here we are trying to rely on these as the 21st century form of energy. These things don't last forever. They have a quite a finite life, and they're hugely hungry in terms of copper and steel and concrete and
diesel.
metal piling and all the rest of it. And the actual turbines themselves are quite an advanced material. These only last about 10 to 12 years, especially offshore. You'd be lucky for them to last about 8, and then they have to be taken down and you have to do it all over again. And this is not sensible stuff, and it's not sensible for CO2 if that's your thing, because the steel and the concrete and all the aluminium and the copper doesn't come free for CO2.
Yeah, it's extremely inefficient in terms of not only operation but supply. I have a prediction that in 25 years, most of these giant wind farms are going to be rusting hulks, rotting into what used to be beautiful vistas here in the United States. Now they're covered with these monsters, and these things are going to, because they are inefficient, the companies who own them now will declare bankruptcy and parachute out. There won't be anybody around to take them down.
That's true. Well, it's different in the UK, of course, because we've entered into such mad contracts with these companies. They won't go bankrupt because they're getting a lot of UK taxpayer cash just to make the miseconomics actually sort of hold up. So they won't be going bankrupt, sadly, because we know these things don't stand up for themselves. But you're absolutely quite right. I mean, I say to people who are really adherent to all these things, if we get a good nuclear technology, if, and it's a big if we were to get those fusion reactors that we've been talking about since I was a young boy in short trousers, but we still talk that fusion might happen one of these days. If that does happen, we would look rather stupid that we have spent literally trillions and trillions of dollars, and we have completely despoiled our green and pleasant lands with wind turbines, solar panels, and cables.
Yeah.
And we've got this new technology that does all of that infinitely more cheaply and reliably. So, I'd rather stick with what we know for now and see what the future holds that actually proves itself as actually working.
Yeah. The further we go right now, without replacing it with nuke or hydro, but the further we go from fossil fuels right now, the more dangerous we make our world.
Well, it's not only that. I'm really upset in the UK. I'm now have people from the ceramics industry. The ceramics industry is broad. That is from making glass right the way through to the plates on our table, and any other sort of ceramic stuff that's used in industry for steel making. It's a very wide spectrum of manufacture, because it requires so much energy to actually make ceramics in all their forms. We are now seeing production lines being literally dismantled, being shipped to China.
Oh,
China will then remake them and will then make the same products on the back of cheap coal that they are mining domestically. And then those products, zero jobs in the UK, will be coming back to the UK, and then they'll be sold in the UK on a diesel ship. So you've got no jobs, no tax, no investment, a big balance of payments problem because you're now buying the stuff abroad, and you've got no CO2 saving either because they're actually making it on a more dirty way, and you're having to transport it halfway across the world. Now, if you can tell me that is green, then I'm the jolly green giant, not
yeah,
anything
I'm
else.
a Martian. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That works. Yeah, it's an education. We talked about the common sense group, I pictured two lonely guys standing there together going, "Doesn't this suck?" You
Well, I
know,
mean,
being
I'm obviously a conservative politician. I take the conservative line in the House of Lords. But this Labour government in the UK is hardline socialism in everything they do. They are really. I mean, you wouldn't see the minutiae quite so much in the US perspective, I shouldn't think, but they are really destroying the economy of this country in terms of higher taxes, more regulation. I mean, you show me an economy that grows on regulation or grows on more tax, then I'll say one doesn't exist because it doesn't. It simply
Uh,
doesn't.
People used to complain. My brother-in-law, uh, he lives in London right now, I think. He was from Wales. And they used to complain under the EU because they said there was so many regulations. And there were. That
Yeah.
ridiculous regulations, And but now the UK cut themselves free of the EU, and it seems like the regulation monkeys are still in business.
Of course they are. Yeah, they're all doing the same thing. You've got to get rid of the monkeys.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I watch Clarkson's Farm, and it gives me gas
yeah,
that
yeah,
TV show because is the whole show is dealing with all the pressures put on farmers and all the
yeah,
ridiculous requirements farmers have to meet.
yeah,
The guy who brings this news to him, he calls him Cheerful Charlie.
yeah, yeah. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Tell him,
I've
here's
met
the
him.
next thing.
I've met him here in the UK Parliament, and yeah, he's just the same character. Yeah,
But yeah, so stepping aside from the energy as an outside observer and a friend of England, my wife's British. Um, I'm pretty depressed at what I see in
yeah.
England right now.
Oh, you're lucky. You're living over there, just seeing it and being depressed. You imagine what it's like living with it.
Well, we have
It's
LA as
infinitely
airport
worse.
in this country.
Yeah. No,
But
it's not in good state. We're now getting rising unemployment. We've not had a dynamic economy for years, but it's not been too bad. But we're now got rising unemployment. We have got our brightest and best are now moving abroad. They're saying, well, why do I want to stay in the UK? I can't afford a house. I've just come out of university. I'm getting taxed hugely. I might as well try my luck in Dubai, or I'll go to the US, or I'll go
right,
to, well, New Zealand or Australia or Canada. I mean, I know, these aren't countries without their own problems, but Dubai is becoming a very attractive place for Brits. It's becoming a huge haven because the tax is very, very low. It feels safe. There isn't crime there. You
business
can afford,
friendly.
you can afford a property. It's business friendly, and you're going to have a good lifestyle. I mean, what's not to like? So that is what we're losing at the moment. And apparently, we're losing a millionaire out of the UK every 45 minutes. And we have got the second biggest exodus of wealthy people apart from China. China's got the most, but then China's got a population of what, 1 billion. UK is probably about half of the same exodus, and we've only got a population of 70 million.
Keep your
So,
eye on
but
China in that regard.
well, I
China,
don't know where they're all going to. Don't know where they're all going to. They're probably going to the Dubai as well, I expect. But we're having what we call a serious brain drain. A serious brain drain.
absolutely,
And
yeah,
the last time we saw this was the 1970s under a previous Labour administration.
yeah. The something I've noticed, and I don't know if politicians see this. Maybe they do. With For years, we always had immigration, including illegal immigration, and for the most part, these were people that were ready to come in, roll their sleeves up, get to work. You bring a guy across from El Salvador, for example, and he would know people when he got here, and the day after he got here, he'd be up hanging drywall in a building site. But with this massive wave that you experienced, Europe as well, and the United States in the last several years,
Yeah.
there is a considerable amount of crime and vagrancy.
Mm,
These are not all drywall hangers and guys that are ready to tear up your garden for you.
yeah.
These are people who just came because they thought it's an easier way of life.
Yeah, I mean, the US has got other issues, of course, because you've got a land border, and land borders are very difficult. But
Yeah.
you would have thought Britain, with a big moat round it, would have been able to stop people who shouldn't be here a little bit more easily. But we've got two problems with the immigration. It's got two sides of the ledger. Number one is the illegal migration, those who are currently coming over on dinghies from France. I mean, there's lots of questions there. We've given France best part of $700 million to say, and they promised to stop the launching from the beaches. They're obviously not doing a very good job of it. And there are multitude of online videos where there are police on the beach, but they're just literally looking the other way or not doing anything about it. So that could be stopped quite easily. But until we start getting a bit tougher and we perhaps come out of some of these international accords, which people flag as, oh, it's international law, you can't do anything about it. Well, I think we need to have a serious talk about that. The other side are the legal migrants, the ones that we've actually given a visa for and said, yeah, that's fine. You've got the skills. We've got a job available. You better come here. Now, I'm sorry to say, under the last few years of my previous Conservative government's administration, that went completely unchecked. It went completely mad. And in the last couple of years, we've had nearly 1 million immigrants in each of those years, legal ones, not illegal ones, legal. And you can see and feel that the complexion of the country has changed rather too rapidly. I mean, Britain's always been a good, welcoming country, but I think the balance has just become a bit too quick, just too fast, and I don't think that bodes well for community cohesion, which at the end of the day is what it's all about. And you're quite right. A lot of these so-called refugees, so the first lot, I don't really believe they're refugees anymore. I think they're literally thinking, well, it's better there than it is here. I'll give it a go. And I've often said, well, if you're you're coming from some war-torn country, what about your mum? What about your sister? What about your wife? What about your children? Are you leaving them there in this war-torn country? Thank God we didn't do that in the Second World War. Otherwise, all the British men would have come to the US and Canada and left all the wives and sisters and children behind. It's a nonsense. I do not believe that they're all coming from war-torn nations. What I do believe, they're coming from pretty rough countries, and it's a better lookout to come here. And I suspect
to go to England.
if I was in their shoes, I'd probably do the same thing. But that doesn't make it a legitimate reason to be here.
Right. Easier to go to UK or US than it is to stay home and fix your own damn country.
Well, you would have thought you would have thought that if these are the brightest and best, I mean, I say that rather loosely, they'd probably be the countries they're leaving from really could do with their services to rebuild after whatever they've been through, or they could be part of the democracy and normalization of those countries. But I don't think they're leaving war-torn countries. They're leaving economically stressed countries, and they think that, and I'm afraid to say they often do have not a tough time of it here. They're on refugee status. They'll be put in a hotel for perhaps a year or more, and they'll get lots of benefits. And life's not that tough. And they can do a bit of underground working, a bit like the guy you referred to throws up a bit of drywall. There's a bit of that kicking around in the UK, and perhaps it's a little bit too easy to do that in the UK than it is in some European countries as well.
How does the Conservative Party feel about demanding assimilation and defending the culture?
Oh, I think we're on that right track, yes, but I don't think you can have the assimilation on a decent pathway with the huge numbers that are currently being experienced. You could do that with low numbers. Of course you can. That's been happening for years. But it has been a feature of the last couple of decades that this has really, really escalated. And I wouldn't be surprised if that escalation is shown in a similar way in the UK. So in the US, I don't think you are experiencing these numbers of people from quite far-flung places as well. It wasn't just nipping over the border from Mexico. You're getting people coming into the US that have, come from halfway around the world.
Well, there's the rub. The biggest abuses, as far as I'm concerned, with the government and the illegal immigration is when a man leaves, we'll say Morocco or Yemen, and he sets off on his refugee path. As soon as he sets foot in a treaty nation, his trip is over.
Yeah.
There's none of this stuff, and I watched it happen in Europe. It happened here for decades. They would go to South America. They would go to Panama. They'd go to Mexico. These are treaty nations.
Oh yeah,
It's
they're
not a
country
tourist
shopping.
thing.
They're country shopping. That's what they're doing, and
Exactly.
you know that is not, in my view, what the United Nations Refugee Convention was discussing. Obviously, it was written in a very long time ago in the 1950s. The world has changed hugely since then. But it was my view that the intention was always the first nation you get to that is safe, that is where you claim refugee status. It is not your right to then go shopping in any nation you fancy. That is not what the UN Refugee Convention was all about. And that is a point of contention that I've argued with, dare I say, the wokey lefties who say, oh, no, it's perfectly all right for them to go wherever they want because these people want open borders. And I wish they'd be rather more brave and say, yeah, we want open borders. They'll never actually say that to you because they know that's hugely unpopular. But they dress it up with sort of the rights of refugees to choose which country they want to go to rather than the first treaty nation they step in where their safety is then assured. So again,
And
a
in this country, it's
1950s,
about
1950s convention that was put together with every good intention in the wreckage of the Second World War is now being loopholed and abused on a wholesale manner in a wholesale manner.
okay. Well, we're getting long on time, and I had one proposal that I told my readers I would put before you. 2 years ago, I had Patricia DeGennaro on. Uh, if you don't work on the international level, you probably never would have met her. She is a professor of, uh, I think, international policy. She teaches at JSOC and SOCOM, teaches our military guys about international policy, and she's an advisor to NATO. I had her on as my second guest when I first started this stuff. That was that was an amazing coup. That's like getting Lord Mackinlay today. But uh, while we're talking, she mentioned Brexit, and this idea just popped into my head. International trade is going nuts right now, having more to do with demographics than economics, but it's coming apart at the seams. And at the time, England was not unwinding Brexit, not yet, and they were looking for a trading partner.
Mm,
And I said to her, I said, the United States could just try to put the screws to England and make a really harsh deal with them, blackmail. Or we could propose being the biggest trading partner in a new Commonwealth of Nations.
mm,
Um, that could create, in my opinion, an economic and military
yeah.
uh, uh, dynamo. And it would be far more rational than, say, NATO, because NATO's gone far beyond its mandate now. We go all the way to Central Europe. That's not what NATO was intended to be, but a Commonwealth of Nations. So if you know anybody in your the
Well,
equivalent of
let me
hard
just
office,
expand. Let me expand a couple of those thoughts there. There is a bit of a gathering stone, a rolling stone, no less, about sort of a CANS UK arrangement, which is Canada, New Zealand, the UK, and Australia. CANS UK, CANS UK, on the basis that we got the same head of state, i.e., the king, and the fundamental common law is the same. And it's strange. I mean, I went to New Zealand many years ago, about 15 years ago, just for a holiday, and you couldn't find somewhere further away from the UK. And yet, as a Brit, you could land there, live there, and you would understand everything. You would understand the fundamentals of how the law worked. The tax system wouldn't be vastly different. It was based on a similar framework of values. And the US is not dissimilar to that. Now, I am a free trader. I'm becoming even more of a capitalist than I ever was. I would personally have zero tariffs around the world.
bingo.
That is my view of things. That I am a complete free trader. But the trouble is, you then get the agricultural lobby says this, and the whatever special interest lobby says, oh, we can't have that because that will upset my wheat production. Whatever. At the end of the day, I want consumers to have the cheapest products because consumers can make those decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
If they don't like
Very
American beef, well, don't
accurate.
buy it. But if it's on the shelf and it's available, you can read about it. You can see what the additives are. If you don't want to buy it, that is a matter of your personal choice. But I know for a fact everybody who comes, loads of Brits come to Florida on holiday each year, and they come back and say, "Oh, I had wonderful steaks and chicken." I said, "Well, hold on. You're usually sort of moaning about that because you don't think the quality is good enough. It's all a load of baloney. I mean, these are just bureaucratic hurdles and barriers, and the EU has been a past master at this. We
Yeah.
now have some of the most expensive food in the world across Europe and the UK because of the bureaucratic hurdles and because we have block trade with very good food producing nations. But now that's my view of the world. I would have zero tariffs. I would particularly want a close arrangement with the US, and I think we've got the chance of one. We've looked at what President Trump is doing from over here, and at times it seems a little bizarre. But I think fundamentally he's doing this to get a lower free trade arrangement with lots of new nations
I
as a little bit of
sincerely
a
hope
little
so.
bit of a bit of a smack round the legs and say, look, this is what I can do to you unless you come to the table and start talking Turkey. I mean, one thing, for instance, the EU and the UK free of the EU, but still perpetuated it for some heaven knows reason. We put a 10% tariff against US cars. The US has always had only a 2.5% tariff against UK and European cars. You think, well, why is that? Why aren't we at least reciprocated? I mean, I'd rather have a zero tariff. And if me as a consumer want to buy an American car, then I will. I'll sort of take it for a test drive and probably say, no, it's a bit of a gas guzzler and it's not as good as a Jaguar. But that would be my decision to make. But we put these artificial barriers up. And in my view, they shouldn't be there. So if you want to think where I'm going politically over the next few years, it is going towards uber capitalism because we've tried crony capitalism, sort of socialist capitalism, interventionist capitalism, and none of it is working. We are not growing our economies as rapidly as we can and should. So for heaven's sake, let's try proper capitalism for a change. It's worth a try.
Great minds. Great minds function in a like fashion. I've been preaching everything you just said for years, and especially lately. And I do hope that Trump's goal is just to be the godfather and then get people in line and start some, grow free trade. If his goal is to have a really great income for the American government, then he'll have accomplished nothing.
Yeah.
I talked to
Well,
free
I think
traders.
the mad thing about tariffs, of course, I mean, say you've got Jaguar Land Rover, a popular car in the US. It's been one of our biggest exports to the US. They're a nice car and they're a prestige car, and lots of Americans like to buy them. If you have a 25-50% tariff, it is not the Jaguar Land Rover or the UK government pays that tariff. Of
Nope.
course they don't. It's the consumer in the US pays it, nobody else. So that tax that's raised isn't tax raised from foreigners. It's tax raised from your own people. If you have your daughter's wedding in the US and you want champagne because of the cachet of champagne, and there's a 25% tariff against French champagne, the French government aren't paying it. The champagne house isn't paying it. The poor father of the bride is paying it in a higher price, and he's paying that higher price to his own U.S. government. So I'm not a fan of tariffs, but if there is some method in what looks like a bit of madness at times, then I hope it comes to pass.
When you purchase something, you pay the sales tax. You pay tariff if there's tariff on there or whatever protections are on there. Then you pay the store's tax and you pay the supplier's tax and the middleman's tax
Yeah,
way back to the source.
the
It's
employment taxes and the
factored into
people who
the
work
cost
there
of
and
doing
all of that.
business. Right.
Yeah.
And then you go home and pay your own income tax.
Exactly. I'd hate to do. I mean, we are so hugely taxed in the UK, particularly on things like fuel. But say you've got, I don't know, you've earned $100 and you've suffered, if you're not even that wealthy in the UK, you might have suffered 40, maybe, it could even be 50 pence or half of that dollar you've earned will have gone in income tax. And then you go and fill your car up with petrol, buy a packet of cigarettes and a bottle of bourbon. I tell you what, you'll have about 5 cents in the dollar of actual stuff you wanted in your hand.
Right.
The government will have probably had 95 cents out of that dollar
Yep.
on the way through.
It's 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 a beast. It's a monster. I don't know how you unwind it. If we did do free trade, I want to be see the first guy who's going to go to our sugar industry and tell them no more money for you.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
government need to stop spending a lot of money on silly things.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I've always I looked at your Doge agenda with some envy. Really, I like the sound of it. I'm not sure how it's going just at the moment, but the relationship seems to have broken down.
it's going to be crazy. Um, Let me wrap up with this. I ask all my guests this question. Who should I be talking to next?
Oh, I would. Well, I tell you what. Why don't you get someone from the Labour Party in the UK on to defend what they are trying to achieve, and whether that is a just a Labour backbencher, i.e., not a minister. But why don't you sort of? Because I expect you're a bit like me. Your X feed, your Facebook feed, we end up talking to people who think the same as us because that is how the algorithm works.
Right.
And I think we do need to talk a bit more widely sometimes and try and understand how the other side that we find quite incomprehensible and unintelligible, we ought to try and find out how they think so that perhaps they can try and educate us. I think they'll fail miserably, but perhaps we can educate them.
Do you have a recommendation of someone who might be a good
Oof.
candidate to speak to?
I'd have to give that some thought, actually. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Back
But
to you.
the trouble is with a lot of these Labour politicians, they're newly elected, they don't have a lifetime of experience, and they're very fearful of going on the media.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I see a lot of people on the left would be really leery of getting on the P4B.
yeah,
I'd have to make all manner of promises in terms of
I won't mention
not
this and I
being
won't
too
mention
hard
that.
on them. How's your relationship with Nigel?
Um, well, I mean, we go back a long, long way. We go back 34, 33 years. Yeah, we speak if we see each other in the corridor, but yeah, we don't really talk, unfortunately. No.
So if you can't have lunch with him and say you should talk to Matt Jordan.
Well, some of his other colleagues might. I mean, I get on quite well with his other colleagues. I've known them as well. There are what five Reform MPs, which is not many out of a house of
Right,
650.
right. Well, just
But yeah, the rest of them, some of them were ex-conservatives that I knew, when they were conservatives. So yeah, they're very reasonable people. But there's no particular reason why Nigel and I don't particularly get on, but just a matter of circumstance, really.
well, by all means, I will look for whatever recommendations you have in terms of guests, because I would love to continue this conversation. I would love to get guests of your stature on this side of the water
Yeah.
to have this same discussion. Who do you know over here? Do you know any first name basis
Well, I
people?
may have to come over in due course as part of the Global Warming Policy Foundation to meet some Washington people. Quite a regular trip for the director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. So I may well be over, but that will be sort of more Washington based. People in the field of energy, particularly, and those of a similar mind. But yeah, because America's just on a different page on energy. They've been through a bit of silly times, nowhere near as silly as we've got to, but they're getting off that quite rapidly
Yeah, I think
because
I think people are pretty sick of the whole uh,
well,
solar
what people
panel.
don't like is cost. That's when it goes wrong. It's all very well saying, "Oh yeah, I'd like a net zero world." Well, yeah, lovely, but when you then say, "Oh, and by the way, it's going to triple your energy bills," they say, "Oh, I'm not so keen now."
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
that's right. Well, the name of the group is the Climate Change
Global Warming Policy Foundation. Yeah,
Global
Global
Warming
Warming Policy
Policy Foundation.
Foundation. International. It's totally international in reach. Lots of friends in the US, lots of friends in Canada and Australia. And I have to say that Canadian result was a strange one, not one we were expecting. And I was looking at where Canada might go as a first country who backs out of net zero properly, because they've been on a pathway of lunacy, much like us. And I thought that Pierre Poilievre would have been the man to back out of that, but circumstance worked against him, and sadly, I think President Trump spooked a lot of Canadians, so they stuck with what they knew, which was, from my point of view as a fellow conservative in America, in Canada, I thought that was a great shame.
Yeah, I think Canada is on a negative trajectory right now, but so is everybody to one extent or another. I was talking earlier, China is in trouble.
Well, I think
billion
China's got a long way to go. China's got a long way to go to be in trouble when it has growth rates of 5-6% a year for the last 20, 30 years. If it has a year of hiccup, that's not trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. It's been a great honor for the P4B. Thank you for your time. You've been very generous.
Thanks, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Say hi to Mel. We've become buddies.
I hope my cousin in California picks us up as well. Yeah.
And yeah, by all means, share the heck out of this when it comes out on Friday. And do come back.
Okay, Matt. Yeah, just let me know. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
All the best.
A few closing thoughts. Out of tragedy comes some great stuff sometimes. You know, there is the gray cloud, but there is the silver lining. There are people who are going to benefit because Craig Mackinlay suffered that crazy sepsis and lost his limbs. Still a terrible tragedy. But now he's got a voice. But it's an interesting benefit. Out of tragedy came really great things. I hope to have Craig Mackinlay back to discuss further some of the things we hit today. Although he's one of the greatest guests I've ever had in terms of information, study, understanding, and being able to communicate his message. So, great show. Come back and see us.
Please tell a friend about the Free Zone Communiqué. We live and die with the share and subscribe buttons. Please use affiliate and sponsor buttons to support our work. Thank you very much for joining us today.